All right. Hope everybody's doing well. Let me go ahead and get the presentation here going. All right. So like Brian mentioned, the main topic that we want to cover today is the sunset strategy. One of the things that I want to make sure we understand is that I'm not really going to give you information that you don't already know. I'm not really going to tell you something that you haven't come across or read in an article somewhere, or new dates that you may have not known about until now. What I'm really trying to do is basically give you the information that people like yourselves have given me, dealers, central stations. We've heard the concerns, we've heard the worries about the next sunset, and we've experienced. Telguard has experienced the analog sunset in 2008. We've gone through the 2G sunset in 2016. So I guess one could say we have a little bit of history with sunsets, and a little bit of experience in dealing with them, and seeing some of the pitfalls that we can encounter, and seeing some of the negatives of a sunset if we don't get ahead of them early enough. So that's part of what we want to accomplish today, just to kind of give you a little bit of a breakdown of what we feel are the things to keep in mind, what we feel are the biggest concerns from our dealer, from our customer base, and what we consider is a successful strategy. Just to put it in very simple terms, you need to understand, you need to plan, and you need to act. Understanding and planning is going to be the bulk of it. Acting is really going to be the easier of the three concepts, the three pillars, I guess, of a successful strategy. So we're going to break it down into 5 different steps. Number 1 is understand the events and understand your options. What is going to happen and what are the options that I have to be able to combat what's about to happen. Step 2 is understand your labor capacity and your own population. So you know that something's going to happen. Well, what do you have to contend with? Do you have necessary manpower to be able to handle the conversions? Do you have a population of 3G or CDMA units that is beyond what you can handle? We need to understand that before we get to planning. Step 3 is you need to plan to increase perceived value, and that is a concept that I'm very assertive on. And you, as dealers or business owners, understand the concept of being able to tell a customer, hey, that unit served you well for 3 years, versus, hey, I just installed that unit last month, now you got to change it out. There's a difference in the perceived value of the unit. Even though both units may have cost the customer the same amount of money when they bought it, the perceived value is intrinsic in the fact that it actually lasted a lot longer with one customer over the other, right? Step 4, you need to plan a replacement strategy. You need to make sure you have hard numbers, that you understand what you're dealing with. And step 5 is you act on the plan. And something that we need to make sure that we also understand within that acting on that plan that you strategized and you conceived is that things will happen along the way, and you need to adapt to them. You need to make sure that you understand, by using, again, hard numbers, where you are, so you can gauge whether you're on track, you can gauge whether you're falling a little behind, and adapt to it as you best see fit. So I think the best way to convey what this strategy is would be to use sort of a case study. So we have a company, we'll call them Demo Dealer because I am not creative at all. Daniel is the owner just because I love that name. It's also one I have. It's a small, 3-person office team. You have 2 people that are doing installation and service. So it's your very small customer, a very small dealer, that much like any of us, just trying to make a dollar each day and trying to survive in this world. So step 1, we need to understand the events, understand our options, understand what's going to happen. So what is going to happen? We know for a fact that AT&T has announced a 3G sunset that is February 22nd, 2022. You start looking it up, you start reading about it, you'll find that February 2022 date everywhere. AT&T has made a public announcement of it, and it's set. Same thing for Verizon. Now, Verizon may be a little trickier, and this is more or less the internet's fault. And I'll just put it out there. With the internet, with the access to a lot of information, you have access to sometimes too much information. So if you start Googling Verizon CDMA sunset, you may have some that will tell you 2019 was the sunset for CDMA. You may have some sites telling you, or some articles telling you, that 2020 is the CDMA sunset. One thing to understand is that we have a contractual, a negotiated date for the industry, and primarily for Telguard, where the CDMA sunset will not finish until December 31st, 2022. And I think that last little sentence that I just mentioned, will not finish until December 31st, 2022. That's a key concept in all of this. When we mentioned the sunset dates, when we mentioned February 2022, and we mentioned December 31st, 2022, we're not talking that, we're not speaking of a sunset that will eventually happen, and once that date hits, everything will turn off. It's not just a switch that goes off for the entire network. There's going to be incremental changes. There's going to be what we call frequency farming, bandwidth changes that are expected to just happen leading up to the sunset. So if you put yourself in the shoes of these carriers, of AT&T and Verizon, and you have an ever-increasing population of personal cell phone users, and you're investing more money in 5G technology and what's coming around the corner, and really you're making your money mostly on the use of data. The use of data is more prevalent on the iPhones, on the Androids, and all and those type of devices. So when you have a population that's increasing, when you have kids getting more smartphones at an earlier age, you benefit more from their usage. So what are you going to do? You're going to give them the bandwidth. You're going to start taking it away, chipping away little by little from the 3G coverage, and giving it to the LTE, because that's where you can get your most money. That's where you make more revenue. The same thing with what we call frequency farming. So frequency farming really relates to the fact that you have so many frequencies that are allocated to you as a carrier. So AT&T may have 4 or 5 frequencies available today. They dedicate 2 of them for 3G. They dedicate the 3 of them that are remaining for LTE. Well, as they start going into 5G technology, as they start the number of LTE devices continue to increase, it's to their interest, it's to their advantage to start taking away some of those frequencies that were allocated to the 3G devices and move it over to the LTE devices. Again, it goes back to being able to provide more access and more data capabilities to those LTE devices that are going to be really consuming more data for them. So with the incremental changes, one of the things that we want to make sure that we all understand is that we don't want to wait until the last minute. We don't want to wait until a customer calls you because that specific city has been hit with frequency refarming, and the frequency that used to be used by 3G devices is now owned by LTE, and radios are starting to go dark, right? So you want to make sure you act accordingly. As far as what options you have, I think the easiest example is really with the commercial applications. With commercial units, Telguard has actually put forth a device we call the TG7 UBL. It's essentially an upgrade board that will take any 3G or CDMA device from a commercial application, whether it's a fire application, commercial Berg application, and it'll actually allow you to take the old board out, pop the new board in, to the point where you don't have to actually remove any wires, because it has the same fittings that the older radios have. It minimizes the hardware cost, because now we're not sending you a whole can that you're going to throw away. Now we're not sending you a battery, we're not sending you an adapter, we're not sending you an extension cable, a bracket, any of those things. So we're minimizing the hardware cost. The fact that you don't have, particularly commercial fire, the fact that you don't have to remove that can, that's labor cost decrease. You don't have to do, you don't have to touch the conduits leading up to the can. That's an incredible time savings for your installers, for your service technicians. The other point that actually goes with it as well is that you maintain the same account history. Now, Telguard gives you the option of doing board swapping. from a registration perspective, from a database perspective, which means that you go into your old subscriber, you go into your old account, you put in the new serial number for the new device you're replacing it with, and the history that you used to have with that customer within Telguard for that old unit just carries on. It just continues on into the LTE device. So it makes it a little bit easier for you to start tracking issues if there were any. Of course, Telguard never has any, but it makes it a lot easier for you to be able to just have that accountability for that customer with a vendor that you choose. Something else that you may want to think about is the board swapping also gives you the ability to change carriers, right? If AT&T was performing well, but your customer feels stronger about Verizon, and I'm not sure why, but there are some of our end users that do feel very strongly about a specific carrier, maybe through previous experience. Maybe we all have our experiences with different carriers. This may be an opportunity to switch carriers. If you had, minimal signal strength, you were sitting good with that unit, but you feel that you could have done better. You do your research, you call tech support or a Telguard, and we're looking at a Verizon unit perhaps doing better signal strength or the other way around. This is an opportunity to completely switch carriers. Again, the fittings, the terminal blocks, everything remains the same. The one thing that you do have to change out that a lot of our customers sometimes don't pay attention to is the antenna. The antenna for LTE is different than the antennas for 3G and CDMA. So if you do have an external antenna or you do have one of those high gain directional antennas to just maximize your signal strength, unless that antenna was rated for LTE frequencies, you're doing yourself a disservice. So that's something to think about as far as the options and what you need to have ready for these swaps. Step 2, so you know what you have to contend with. You know the options that are at your disposal. Now you need to understand your labor capacity and your population. So how much extra work can I handle? The main thing is we're all in it to make money. There's no mystery or secrecy to it. We all want to make money, and we want to continue to increase our customer base. We want to continue to increase our population. Excuse me. So we want to make sure that whatever it is that we do is not it's not preventing us from creating new business. In the case study that I'm putting forth, we have the installation team. It's the same as the service team. It's only 2 people, 2 trucks, 2 installers. So in that particular scenario, I want to make sure that I understand how much work can I actually handle outside of the regular growth that I want to push on my team. Physical installation is really only half the job. So the physical installation for your service technicians, installation technicians, that's more or less getting to the finish line. There's a lot of work that goes into this prior to that. Contacting customers, calling them, emailing them, keeping track of who's doing what. So there's a lot more to it. So just want to make sure that before planning on a strategy, you understand what it is that you can do without interfering with normal business growth. So in this example, for instance, demo dealer, we'll just say 4 hours a week for someone at the office, and we'll say about 8 hours of technician time every month. Because we're trying to keep busy. We're always trying to do something to grow the business. So you want to make sure that you plan to have extra labor without interfering with your current growing plans. Now, how many units am I going to need to replace? That's a big question. How many units am I going to have to replace from Telguard, from other vendors out there? This is something that you need to seriously sit down, get the reports that you need, and make sure that you're actually looking at the right numbers, right? Now, with smaller companies, I would say it's a lot easier as far as keeping track of the units. Once you get to that stage where you have a lot more devices that you can keep up with, which may be a good thing to have, right? Oh, I have too many devices. I have too much recurrent revenue. Could be a good thing. But also one thing that comes to mind is a lot of the times we don't have an accurate portrayal of the accounts. So we may have a vendor with 1,000 units, and guess what? 999 of those active units are legitimate paying customers, But it could be that one unit, that customer canceled 3 months ago, and I just never got around to get Telguard to go ahead and deactivate that unit, right? So this is a good opportunity since you're going over, you're doing the effort to get a report of your units, to really reconcile with Central Station, reconcile with your accounting department to make sure that you're paying for what you're using. Accurate 3G and CDMA reports are at the backbone of the strategy. You're not going to be able to strategize and fully implement a plan unless you know what you're dealing with. Now, from Telguard side, from our perspective, we actually have a dedicated 3G CDMA report that we put together, and we made it as accessible as possible. And it'll give you not only the 3G, not only the CDMA units, but also it'll actually scrub looking for 2G devices. And I know we probably don't really have too many of those out there still. And if you do, I hope they are deactivated, but it'll actually do that. So once you go into telguard.com, it's a homepage you're very familiar with, dealer menu, 3G report. It's really that simple. Now, what I would encourage you to do is to export it. Don't just look at it, export it into a CSV file. And if you're familiar with Excel, the CSV file is going to be the core of what you want to use. Once you have it in Excel, now you can manipulate it to the best of your abilities. You can go ahead and add a filter, you can sort it, and this is going to come really handy as we start to strategize on which customers do I want to talk to first. Which customers am I going to reach out to and say, you know what, you've actually had a few years under your belt with this unit. Let me go ahead and get to you now versus, oh, that customer, shoot, I actually just installed his unit maybe a year or two ago. Maybe I have to wait a little bit to kind of, again, give them that perceived value for that device. So the fact that we have that list, the fact that it gives you a registration date, which basically means when you went in and filled out the form, the fact that it gives you an activation date, and that means your installer went on site, powered up that unit, and got it working on that date. Those are the parameters that you would need to be able to fully strategize on how to convert them or when to convert them to LTE. Perceived value. So this is something that it can perhaps be a little tricky and can perhaps be a little mysterious in a sense. And it really is different for every customer, right? What can I offer during the tech visit? There is no, it's not a secret that to contact a customer to let them that we need to replace a unit is an inconvenience. It's not something the customer was expecting. It's not something that the end user was like, oh yeah, come on in. I was waiting for you. I wanted you to come into my warehouse, and I wanted to definitely have somebody waiting for you at the door to let you in, so you can do something for a couple of hours, and that really will not benefit me in a perceivable way. That's the way that end users will take it, right? So we want to make sure that we offer something extra with that visit. We know that a technician is going to be there. We know that a technician is going to have to touch different things. We know that a technician, specifically in commercial fire, once they do any kind of hardware change, they're going to have to do walk tests. They're going to have to do extra things to make sure that everything is working accordingly. Advertise that as a plus, as a positive. We're getting out there, we're going to be there. Not only are we going to replace the radio to the latest and greatest technology that's going to take you into however long, we're also going to go ahead and do a systems upgrade. We're going to go ahead and check on the battery levels, check on everything we want to check while we're there. That's a free service, or it's a service that is bundled. When it comes to residential, maybe you have an opportunity to upgrade services, right? If you have a customer that has a TG1 Express and they just had the basic service, it's an opportunity to perhaps talk about Telguard Interactive or the HomeControl Flex solution that we offer. Perhaps it's an opportunity to give them a quick demo, right? Let them download the app. Like, hey, I'm going to be out there. Here's the app. Download it. Take a little browse through the demo. See if you like what you see, and since I'm going to be there anyway, half of my visit is already there. I can do the installation in half the time, or cut you a deal on the cost of installation, or something along those lines. The main thing is we want to make sure that our visit serves two purposes besides just replacing the device, right? On the one hand, we want to make sure that we seek the opportunity to upsell or to do something extra. But on the other hand, we want to make sure that we offer extra value to the customer. So those two have to be balanced, have to go hand in hand. The term that we use here is upsell with empathy. You don't want to push on something after understanding that your customer is really not looking to have any extra expenses. But at the same time, we want to make sure that you let them know that you're going to be at the location. You're going to already inconvenience them while we're there. Here's something else that we can do for you. So complimentary battery checks, overall system tests, new yard signage, window clings, anything that would give that extra perceived value to the customer. Are they being inconvenienced? Yes. They are getting the latest and greatest technology, of course, but they're also getting something a little extra that they wouldn't normally get. Planning a replacement strategy. Step 4, after you gather information, after you understand what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, you know your capabilities, and you know the population that you have to deal with, you understand now your strategy for offering extra services or offering a little extra something when you visit. Now it's time to really drill down on the numbers and figure out what it is that you can do and what it is that you should do to be able to meet your deadlines, right? So how many units do I need to replace in a month? And this is where a little math comes into the picture. Number one, you're going to use the reports that we provided, the 3G and CDMA unit reports, and the same goes for any other vendors. So if you have any other reports from other vendors, you know, at the end of the day, it's all about how many units you have to transition into newer technology. So put together those reports and understand what you have to deal with. You got to do the math, right? So let's just say you have 65 units that you have to replace. You have 65 units that you need to replace by the end of 2022. In this specific case, we're looking at 58 units that are AT&T and 7 units that are Verizon. So 58 units will need to be replaced by February of 2022, and 7 of those units will need to be replaced by the end of 2022. Starting today, we have 20 months until the AT&T sunset and 30 until the Verizon sunset, right? So doing our basic math, we're going to do the math. 58 units on AT&T divided by 20 months comes out to 2.9. That means that for me to stay on track and to be able to say that I've completed the transition for AT&T devices before AT&T hits the sunset, I have to do 3 units per month. That's my goal. I got to be able to convert 3 units per month every month leading up to the sunset so that I can be free of those 3G units before then. Same goes for Verizon. For Verizon, we only have 7 units in this case. We have 30 months, comes out to 0.2. So in reality, I got to do at least 1 Verizon unit every 5 months. So this is your goal. This is your ideal timeline. If nothing ever goes wrong and you can hit your customers and you're getting the right responses, this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with 3 units a month that you got to hit, 1 Verizon unit every 5 months. Now, the question is, does it happen? How do I make it happen? Who do I contact first? It really comes down to perceived value again. It really comes down to longevity of the customer. It really comes down to how do we make the conversation a little bit easier, right? So when you look at your customer base, when you look at the reports, whether it's provided by Telguard or any other vendors that you're replacing from, I'm hoping that other vendors give you activation dates as well, or that you have a good reference as to when that happened, because that'll give you a better understanding of who to contact first. If you have a customer that installed or that purchased a device and the 3G device was installed in 2016 versus a customer that installed a device in 2017, the math will tell you. You contact the customer 2016 now and first and get him to agree to the transition before the customer in 2017, because the perceived value of the 2017 installation will increase the longer time we let it go, right? Now, we're not going to go ahead and let it go until the very end, but we can play with our numbers. We can play with our with a report to really understand how much leeway we have. So once you have the report set up, you have it pulled up in a spreadsheet, you're going to look at the activation date. And just using a quick sort, activation date is what you want to look for. You're going to go oldest to newest and make sure that you're hitting those units that have the oldest activation date. Again, oldest activation date will have the longest perceived value for that device. The conversation gets a lot easier that way. Now, we're not saying that we're going to push those customers that had a more recent installation until January 2022 or the end of 2022. It just means that you got to strategize who you contact first. Now, how do I contact customers? And this is a question that we get quite a bit, particularly on the customer service side and on the sales side. And there really isn't a clear answer to it. If there was a clear answer, I would tell you, I am not the best qualified to give you the answer. That's my answer. The best qualified person to give you the answer is yourselves. You know how you contact your customers. You know how you got that business. You know how you keep track of those customers. If there is a customer that's not paying their bill on time, is email good enough for you to get them to respond? Is a phone call good enough? Or is it maybe just an invoice stuffer when you offer new services, right? So the strategy as far as communication with your customers, it's very different for everybody. Every dealer is going to have a different strategy, and it really comes down to how you handle business. One thing I want to make sure that I convey to you is that no one understands your customers better than you. As much as Brian or myself or anybody here at Telguard can tell you stories about how different customers are doing different things, the best judge of how to do it will be yourselves. And by all means, I think Brian's open to the idea as well. If you want to talk about how other customers are doing it, how they're communicating, or how frequently they're doing things, we're more than open to sharing some of those stories. But they may not be applicable to your customers. Only you know what works best. So we've understood what we have to accomplish. We have a strategy in place, right? Because we ran that report. We know the total number of units we got to hit. We have a mindset of how many units we got to hit every month. So with that mindset, with that number in mind, we know how much time we have to spend. So if for July, for instance, I got to hit 3 customers, or 3 AT&T customers and 1 Verizon customer, maybe I'm going to go ahead and the first month, I'm going to go ahead and call 7 people, 8 people, playing the numbers. Let's see what kind of response I get. If I get half of those people to answer the phone, and only half of those people to actually agree to an appointment, now I'm dealing with what, maybe 2 changes, 2 hardware changes for that month. Well, that's not good enough. Now I got to make sure that I bump up the rate of calling people. Maybe calling is not the right strategy. So I would probably say that as you begin to act on the strategy, you got to have a couple of months of a trial period, right? You're not going to know the type of response that you're going to get until you actually get out there and talk to your customers. Again, we could tell you stories about how it happens for other customers, but you know your own customer base. So the first couple of months is going to be really a trial run, understanding how many calls, how many emails, how many invoice stuffers, or how many campaigns you have to put out to really get the right amount of appointments needed. Now, if one strategy is not working, of course, communication shift. If something's not working, try something else. The main thing as far as adapting to what's going on, it's really that you have to make sure you adapt, you adjust your monthly goal. If during July, August, and September until the end of the year, because of everything that's going on, you really couldn't hit that mark of 3 every month, and you were only getting two a month, well, it's time to do the math again. You reassess and you say, okay, now 2021 and 2022, 3 is not the magic number anymore for monthly. Now I got to do 4. I got to step it up. Now I got to put more resources toward getting it done. So that's one part of adjusting. As far as being able to do it, being able to get out there and do it, we also want to make sure that we minimize. We also want to make sure that we minimize the time spent on the field if the customer is inconvenienced, if the customer is not ready to spend more money on an extra service, or if they didn't respond well to your offer of a upgraded service or an inspection, outside of the norm. It's all about saving the time. It's all about getting in and out as quickly as possible. Telguard, as you can see here on the presentation, gives you the option of doing a serial number swap. So the serial number swap is a great tool. What you have is your technician going on site, giving you the serial number, that you are going to replace the device with. You go in, telguard.com, you put in the old serial number, you select the replace option, and simply put, all you got to do is put in the new serial number. Once you put in the new serial number, it gets validated, it gets switched on the account side, so all the database and everything on the software side now points to the new unit. At that point, all your technician has to do is pop in the new board, plug in the terminal blocks accordingly, activate the unit, and do whatever testing needs to be done. So it's about efficiency when there isn't much more that you can do at that location, right? So customer didn't agree to an upgrade, didn't agree to anything else, they're inconvenienced by it. You're reading the customer, you know that it's not one that really wants to invest any more than he has to. So in and out as quickly as possible. Serial number swap really is what gives you that option. The other thing that we want to make sure that we understand is we need to adapt to a changing environment. The environment for 3G, for CDMA, for LTE, even for 5G, as it looks today, the coverage maps, the ability to go into a specific building and maybe get poor signal could change drastically tomorrow, right? So I could walk into an office building today, tomorrow I walk back in and I have 2 bars higher signal strength because they're shifting things around to accommodate to more LTE. So that's something that we want to make sure that we understand. What we see today may not be what you see tomorrow. So there could be signal degradations. There could be what I mentioned before, frequency refarming. Something else that sometimes comes into the picture is impact at a larger scale, right? And I hate to bring this up, but when you have natural disasters, it's a perfect example of a business decision that affects everybody, right? You have a natural disaster, a hurricane or something along those lines, where towers are physically impacted. Well, I'm AT&T, I'm Verizon. I know that I'm on track to change those out to LTE anyway. Am I really going to spend money? Am I really going to pour in more money on a technology like 3G or CDMA that I'm trying to get rid of? Or am I going to take that opportunity to really just go ahead and convert them over to LTE, right? So that's something else to keep in mind, that even though we have this great plan, we have the number that we have to hit every month, we need to make sure that we know that we have to reassess, we have to adapt, not only to our customer response, but also to a changing environment that could be caused by a carrier decision, could be caused by a natural disaster, something that's completely out of our control. So with that, I'll bring Brian over to give you a little bit more information.
Wow. Daniel Rosales, that was a lot of good information there, a lot of good tips and strategy for the dealers to take advantage of. Thank you so much. So as we're kind of winding this thing up, I just wanted to quickly review the product, right? So Daniel's kind of laid out the strategy. So then what is the product that you would use to replace these customers that you're dealing with? So let's take a quick look at the residential stuff first. Of course, for any of the outgoing 3G or CDMA TG1 Express units, the recommendation would just be to replace it with a TG1 Express LTE unit. And as Daniel mentioned earlier, you can choose to keep the same carrier, Verizon LTE or AT&T LTE, or you can try the alternative carrier. If that particular unit maybe, the signal was not the greatest over the course of its installation. The other thing to kind of keep in mind is we are running promos with our distributors. Currently, I think the promotion that we have in place until the sunset's complete is you buy 3 TG1 Express units from distribution, you will get 1 free. But of course, this is just the general promotion. I would say for any volume sort of situations, bring those to me. Let's talk about them and see what makes sense. As Daniel mentioned earlier, again, we want to offer some value. So for your customers that have these TG1 Express units installed and maybe did not have an interactive service in play before, let's revisit that topic. Let's take a look at and see if their interests have changed. Their lifestyle has changed to the point where they want a little more convenience in their world. So of course, enter HomeControl Flex. This is our interactive solution that is utilized through the TG1 Express. As you can see on the screen, these are just some shots from the web portal. Nice clean interface for the customer to take advantage of. Of course, they can look at the Arlo cameras through the portal and/or app. Some new enhancements that we rolled out recently to HomeControl Flex is we actually have a multi-site capability. So now if your customer has a vacation home, they have a business that they want a security system installed on, you can use HomeControl Flex to tie these different sites into the same app without the customer having to log in, log out. So that's some really powerful functionality for these customers with more than one location that they would like to monitor and track and see reports for. In addition to that, we did roll out push notifications. This is kind of an alternative to what we had before with the email and text notifications, but I don't know about everyone else on the call. I personally like push notifications a lot better. It just seems like it's instantaneous. It hits you immediately, and hopefully down the road that opens up some other functionality for us. I did mention the Arlo camera system still in play with Telguard. It's a pretty powerful wireless camera HD solution. I have several installed at my house. I know Daniel has them at his house, and I mean, I have nothing but positive things to say about them. You can put them anywhere, you can mount them anywhere, indoors, outdoors. They're IP65 rated. We are running some promotions through distribution on certain models of the camera, so I would just check with your distributors to see what deals might be had there. So in addition to the Arlo cameras, of course, like most other services today, we are part of the Alexa ecosystem. Who doesn't want to live in the future and control things with your voice? So you can download the HomeControl Flex skill from Alexa and use that on your Echo devices and kind of enjoy all that hands-free stuff. I think that all the kids are about nowadays. One other thing I did want to mention that I don't know if a lot of our dealers are aware of, the Telguard Virtual Modem. The Telguard Virtual Modem is something that we rolled out to basically offer panel upload download. It's specific to all of our LTE products. It uses the existing connection that you make with our product. So there's nothing different that a Telguard installer would do to utilize this functionality. Now, we have validated this particular service for Compass, Enterprise Downloader, DLX 900, DLS5. I believe we are looking at some other panel programming softwares to hopefully roll out in the near future, but these are kind of the current ones that we're tapped into. So, on the dealer side, upgrading to an LTE unit, of course, protects your customer. It keeps their signals processing, in all different kinds of industries. But now upgrading to LTE offers this extra value for the dealer. So if you are a fan of panel upload download software, now you can take advantage of that at no extra cost. There is some specifications you want to keep in mind. Of course, all this is addressed on our telguard.com/apps link, so you can get on there and see specifics, but primarily the operating system just needs to be compatible with the 64-bit computer running Windows 7 or later. So keep that in mind. So transitioning to the commercial intrusion and fire products, Daniel touched on the essentially the upgrade option, the economical upgrade option for these solutions. Of course, we don't recommend just ripping out the can, replacing it with a whole new can. You're spending extra money unnecessarily. You're causing your customer to spend money unnecessarily in a time of, unexpected costs, per se. So we would highly recommend just take advantage of the TG7 UBL board swap option. This is, as some of you may remember from the 2G sunset era, we had a similar board called TG Kit. This is essentially its replacement. It is just kind of a leaner, meaner version of that TG Kit, but the goal of the product is still the same, just to offer something that's very, very cost efficient for our dealers. It carries over all the same UL listings. We have both flavors, AT&T LTE or Verizon LTE as options, so you choose what works best for your customer. And I think Daniel did kind of talk a little bit about how easy it was to kind of swap over one board to another, but I did want him to kind of commentate a little bit more on that. So with that, I'm going to kind of bring Daniel back into the picture to wrap this thing up.
All right, so we have a fancy animation here, and it really goes. It really just kind of illustrates what it is that you do when you use a TG7 UBL to convert a device from a 3G to an LTE. Number one thing, you're going to remove all the connections from the board, but you're not actually removing the connections from the terminal block. You're not actually removing the CAN. You're not dealing with the conduit connections or anything along those lines. You're removing the antenna and anything that touches the board. 4 screws, hold it down, remove the old board, replace with a new board. I'm not even sure that there's much more that I can add to it, really. And as I see the animation, it is running a little slower than usual. But that's basically all you do. You mount the new board, you bring the connections back, all the RJ cord fittings, the terminal block fittings, they are all the same, and they go in the same location as the 3G or the CDMA board. So there's really not much that you need to change there. Again, I can't reiterate enough. The antenna is probably one of the key components that we get questions on, or we get complaints from every once in a while. Make sure that the antenna gets replaced as well. The TG7 UBL does come with an LTE antenna, so make sure you use it. I know it may be a little bit of an annoyance, especially if you have the external antenna extended, closer to the roof, or maybe mounted elsewhere outside, because we do give you that 12-foot extension cable when you purchase a device. But it's important that you change out the antenna to make sure that you are using everything that LTE technology has to offer. So with that, I guess we move into a little Q&A section.
Yeah, I don't see any questions currently, so I'm just going to double check really fast. Yeah, it looks like that's basically it. So again, I just want to say thanks for everybody for sitting in and putting up with all this knowledge. I definitely see some value and benefit to all of this, and good luck out there. Stay safe, stay healthy. You have my contact information in front of you, so feel free to reach out, with anything, even if it's not sales related. I'll do my best to try to address that. So yeah, I think we can pretty much wrap it up at this point.